Good morning, colleagues. Happy New Year to everyone. We have with us here this morning our new Secretary-General, His Excellency António Guterres. It is my honor and pleasure, Mr. Secretary-General, welcome to the United Nations. This is your home. May I now invite you to say a few words to us all.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, this is indeed a very emotional moment for me. I'm humbled and happy to be with all of you here today. 10 years ago, I had the chance to start being a staff member of the UN. And I had the privilege to serve not only the UN, but as High Commissioner for Refugees, to serve the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. And in that work, I've learned that if the UN is the main pillar of multilateralism, the UN staff is the main pillar of the UN. And I could witness the courage, the determination, the generosity, and the wisdom and competence of my UNHCR colleagues all over the world. And so, as you can imagine, after 1 year of sabbatic period is for me an enormous happiness and an enormous privilege to be again able to call you my colleagues, and I'm very proud to be your colleague. But having said that, I think we should have no illusions. We are facing very challenging times. On one hand, we see everywhere in the world conflicts that multiply, that are interlinked, that also have triggered this new phenomenon of global terrorism. And you can imagine what it is for me that have worked as High Commissioner with the Turkish people, that became the largest country receiving refugees in the world. And having witnessed the generosity of the Turkish people, to see now the Turkish people being victim of this terrible terrorist attack of the last few days. And so, a world in which conflicts multiply and are interlinked with this new phenomenon of global terrorism. Conflicts in which international humanitarian law is not respected. Situations in which we see massive human rights violations. Even refugee law is no longer as respected as it was a few years ago. I remember the times when mostly borders were open, and now, unfortunately, we see borders closed and people not even having the right to be a refugee in different parts of the world. On the other hand, if it is true that we have witnessed an enormous economic progress, an enormous technological progress, if it is true that we have less extreme poor in the world, that in general social welfare has improved as an average, the truth is too that inequalities have grown quite dramatically. And in a world in which everything became global and communication became global, the fact we are excluded makes it even more unbearable, because people now can see how others live, can see the prosperity in other parts of the world. And so the exclusion is something that more easily triggers revolt, anger, and become a factor of instability and of conflict in many situations around the world. So, when one looks at the global mega trends from population growth to climate change and to other aspects that are interlinked, we see that we live in a world where the problems became global and there is no way they can be solved on a country-by-country basis. And so, this is the moment in which we need to assert the value of multilateralism. This is the moment in which we need to recognize that only global solutions can address global problems, and that the UN is the cornerstone of that multilateral approach. But having said so, I think it's important to recognize that we cannot take anything for granted. This belief I have expressed is not shared by many people around the world. And as we see in many countries a growing divide between public opinions and governments or political establishments, we also see, in relation to international organizations like the UN, a lot of resistance in many parts of the world, and a lot of skepticism about the role the UN can play. And so I think it's very important for us to be proud of what we do as UN, to recognize our achievements. Many, many people that we have rescued, many, many people that have suffered much less if the UN would not exist. Many, many people that would suffer much less, that have suffered much less because of the UN existing. Many people that saw their living conditions improve through international cooperation in different parts of the world. So all these things we need to be proud of, but we also need to be able to recognize our shortcomings, to recognize our failures, to recognize situations in which we are not able to deliver as we should for the people we care for. In UNHCR, it was very easy to define the people we care for. The people we care for were basically the refugees and internally displaced. Now the people we care for here, it's everybody. And you need to be able to respond to the anxieties, to the concerns, and to the aspirations of everybody around the world. That's not easy. And let's be honest, we are not yet entirely ready to do it properly. So we need to have a strong engagement to change and to reform and to improve. And that engagement needs to be our engagement, of all of us. It's not an engagement of a Secretary-General or of one or other managers of the organization. It must be our collective engagement to be able to address the shortcomings that we have. We still fail in relation to prevention of conflicts and to conflict resolution. We still have difficulties in bringing together peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights that are three aspects of the same reality. We still fail to recognize that there is a unifying factor in everything we do, and that factor is people. And people is undivided. So when we look at the different areas of action of the UN, we need to be able to integrate them, because people integrate them in the receiving hand. And at the same time, we need to make sure that we are able to reform the UN development system as member states have asked us. And we need to try to get rid of this straitjacket of bureaucracy that makes our life so difficult in many of the things we do. And this requires a lot of effort from ourselves, but this also requires a lot of discussion and dialogue and mutual understanding with member states, and to overcome many of the divides that still exist within the organization. So these times will be challenging, but we need to be aware it's not enough to do the right thing. We need to earn the right to do the right thing. And that, of course, is something in which we need to be all together. I know that the way this process of election has been developed has generated a lot of expectations. I think it's useful to say that there are no miracles, and I'm sure I'm not a miracle maker. And the only way for us to be able to achieve our goals is to really work together as a team, and to be able to deserve, to serve the noble values enshrined in the Charter, that are the values of the UN, that are the values that unite mankind. Thank you very much. And the 9th of January, we will have our town hall meeting, and there my main objective will be to listen to your concerns, to your aspirations, to your opinions, to your suggestions, more than to come with ready-made ideas for the future. But I'm very interested in engaging with all of you in a meaningful dialogue. Thank you very much to all of you, and Happy New Year.